up all the food.
What'd you call me?
Man, I ain't Poe.
Hello, welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. Today's film commentary is going to be about the film titled Nope by the director Jordan Peele. It has a runtime of 2 hours and 10 minutes with a rating of rated R, and it was released in 2022. This will be a part of my Black film series, films that I feel that were directed by Black people for Black audiences, and different variations of genre and stylistic approaches. Okay, so basically I don't know about all of us, but I get super excited about anything that Jordan Peele puts out in terms of films, even shows that he's done. And although we've probably spoken about this before, maybe not. I don't know if I've actually done anything about commentary-wise regarding Jordan Peele's films, or I've seen them and his shows and things that he did before he started Monkey Paw Productions. But anyway, I'm going on a spiel here. Let me tailor it back. So the film is basically about this whole idea of spectacle. And so watching it again, I wanted to sort of touch on things that I think really makes the film so good. And personally, yes, I do think that the film is a great film. There are films from Jordan that I prefer over others, but for the most part, I enjoy all of his films, or have enjoyed all of his horror films so far. Some films that he's been producing, like I believe he helped produce the new or remade version of Candyman, and I really thought that film was pretty good. And then he also, I think recently, he might have helped produce Monkey Man with Dev Patel. It was pretty interesting too. I'm not going to do commentaries on either of those right now, but I'm just throwing stuff out there. So specifically in films that he's directed in the horror genre, this is the most recent one that I can think of that I wanted to include in the Black film series, since I haven't done one in a while. And basically the whole idea of the film is spectacle, but we're going to sort of break that down into different characters and maybe some questions that I had and things that maybe other people might discuss in the comments. Okay, so the film really hones in on this idea of spectacle, and then we see that in varying levels of trauma, actor slash actresses perspectives, or otherwise characters' perspectives, and just the approaches of how, I guess, the dynamics of capitalism or needing to be a part of something or needing fame stand out specifically in the film. Maybe not even just fame, but the idea that fame is almost exclusively connected to money, and people need money to survive, but I do think that there's something to be said about the idea of having attention and what that brings. And then I guess you could track in Hollywood as well, because this setting and plot of the film is in California, and so even though it looks like the main characters, OJ and M, live in rural parts of California, they still are very much in that Hollywood entertainment space. Emerald even has sort of a spiel of what the things she does on the side, which are basically all in the industry and in the entertainment industry specifically. And OJ, you can just tell he connects better with animals, and he's there to do a job and make sure the animals are safe and the people are safe, and that's it. And that's what he's been trained to do, probably from his father. And who's basically, who's Otis Sr., and then you have OJ, who's, the oldest son. Anyway, I'm getting on another spiel. So basically, with all that being said, let's start with the siblings. So M and OJ seem to have a really good relationship, and that there's great chemistry on screen. And specifically when I say chemistry, I'm not saying anything romantic. I'm saying that they just have this sort of explosive, like, yes, we bicker and we argue, but we can joke with each other. We can be honest with each other. We are close. We are family. And they just went through sort of a tough time right as the film starts. And their father dies from suspicious circumstances. Basically, a coin is lodged into his head and he dies. And there's really no explanation from it, which we find out later. It's connected to this sort of being in the sky. And it's really sad and very quick and odd all at once. And so they lost their father, and then OJ has to take on the reins of the family business. So the family owns this land where I guess you could say, they have show horses that they train and take care of, and that's the only animal that is on the land that they're taking care of. And right when the film starts, you can see that maybe there's some financial issues, and the dad even says like, "Hey, we're gonna do great with this if we just do good this next shoot." And of course, he ends up dying before he's able to help with that, and so M kind of jumps in and helps OJ, which is great. Except clearly, OJ is a lot better with animals than people. But then again, during that shoot and that scene, you can see that people are not really loving that he's not an extrovert, which, like, okay. And they're not really listening to him, and he's trying to be like, hey, don't get too close to the animal. Can we have a break really quickly? So, sort of tying into something else that'll come up later, the use of real live animals to have probably a better shot on screen and to make it feel more realistic for the actors when they're pretending, basically, but not actually giving the trainer your respect and the animal as well on set, and pushing it too far and then being upset when the outcome is exactly what would happen when the animal is agitated or not considered, which we'll see again later with another animal, an ape. I suppose it's an ape or a form of a monkey, and another one of our characters' traumatic childhoods. So yes, oh god. So there's all this idea again of spectacle, tying in the entertainment industry and them being in California, even though they live more in a rural area, they're close to Hollywood. Their family has been doing their thing since the beginning, and that's a really big accomplishment, especially for Black American people, because of the hardships that we have in America, so on and so forth. And the sibling dynamic sort of giving us that comedic relief, that that fighting, where we want the characters to do well, we want them to be protected, we understand that the situation gets really kind of scary and mysterious later, and just having those characters be connected and really have that shown on the screen really well, I think, is another form of what makes the film good. Okay, so with all that, when we go into spectacle, this idea of, again, the entertainment industry, but just people wanting to belong, wanting attention, wanting to get the shot, the Oprah shot. Pretty quickly, OJ and M realize that something on their land is not as it seems, and because of some choices, with Emerald being the extrovert, being like, we should get cameras. This will help us pay our finances. Currently, I think the land that they own is maybe in some sort of financial trouble, although I don't know that we get too deep into that I remember. But it's enough that they have a neighbor who owns a Western-themed theme park, and they are going to him and selling the horses, but OJ has every intention of buying them back, but they need the money to survive now, so they are still doing that. And what he doesn't know is that he's not going to get a chance to get those horses back, but that's for another discussion. So we go into this, and I think pretty quickly they realize that something is on their land. And once they get the cameras, and they have this whole newfound friendship with one of the associates at I believe it's called Fry. It's like a Best Buy, I guess, but like an older version of it. I'm sorry, maybe I'm not old enough. But anyway, this guy, I believe his name is Angel. He sort of helps them set it all up, and then sort of includes himself in their search of what's going on. And he pretty quickly assumes it's an alien or some being, and I think after a while, OJ and M are starting to take it serious because there are strange things happening, and then there are, okay, very scary things are happening. They notice on the camera that the there's a cloud that's not moving and just stuff like that. That's not normal. Uh, what we don't know at that time when M and OJ are sort of in the dark, but they're noticing really odd things, starting with their father's death, of course, is that their neighbors who own that theme park are a little odd. They've noticed that there's a being that they're already trying to sort of train, and they're baiting that being by using the horses that they're buying from OJ that they might have made a plan to sell back to him, but really they're using those horses as bait to get this being to come down, and then they're trying to showcase it to people for money, and then they even have like merch, sort of like alien merch. And I suppose the few times that they did test it, none of the family members died, so they felt like, maybe they were invincible. I'm not sure if they had any audiences at that time or if it was just the family. So the main guy, his name is Jupe, and he's like the father, and then there's his wife, and then he has some kids, and he's the one who has sort of a history of trauma with animals, and he was a child actor, and there was like a major tragedy on set. And so anyway, I think that comes into play with the idea of spectacle, because you can already see it in other ways that people are kind of doing shady stuff, not really taking in the risk, even though they have a history of knowing what it's like, what happens when the risks aren't thoroughly vetted. It's just all crazy, honestly. And I know a part of the spectacle that is this film is that people need money. And so, of course, for OJ and M specifically, they're running out of money. They need to keep the land afloat. There's always work to do, right? Okay. And then for Jupe, it could be the same thing. Like, we don't really get into his financials, but I think he's probably in a better place than his neighbors. And even then, you're always trying to like find more ways to make money. But did he really have to go as far as risking people's lives with something that he wasn't entirely sure about just because it's different and it's cool? And then, at least with OJ and M, even though they are trying to catch it on camera and they're deciding that, hey, if we can get a good shot, we can make a lot of money from this. And it's on our land, basically, which Jupe also tries to buy their land. And I think he's tried to do that before, and that didn't really, they were not open to that, of course, land, I suppose. And then, yeah, all these things that I'm sort of breaking down now. But at least with M and OJ, at least it was like on their property. They're not like baiting it. It just kind of invades in their space, but it's also in the sky, so they don't really own the sky, right? It's all these things. And so I just thought that's interesting. So when we get into other ideas of spectacle that the film gets into, besides all that and the relationships and the differences in the characters, Jupe's character, there's a sense of deep rooted sadness for him, because when he was a kid, he was on this sort of family show where there was basically a monkey slash ape. I don't know what species specifically. I can't remember. Chimpanzee maybe. And this chimpanzee was trained to like be cute and fun, and it was different, and it was out there, and it was risky. And the live audience loved it. And then obviously they had really probably good views for the show. And it was a whole thing, right? And it was a whole world building, merch, you name it, they had it, I'm sure. But one time, I guess the animal was really irritated and triggered by a balloon popping. It was like the birthday episode or like anniversary episode. And it just triggered the animal, and the animal just basically started killing the cast members. I believe Jupe and his other co-star, she was a young girl, they survived. She had injuries, so much so that she, in the present, has to wear a veil, which we see later in the film when he invites her to one of his little baited shows for the being to fly by and take one of the horses, and it goes wrong. And then Jupe survived because right as the animal saw him, I guess the authorities had come in and shot the animal before it could hurt Jupe. And so it's all these things. And then the really crazy thing about living through that trauma is he was a child actor, so he really wouldn't have had any real power over what he was doing. Like, he could have loved acting, and it seems like as an adult he still enjoyed being on that set before the craziness happened. Basically, the spectacle of his traumatic childhood is something that he also tries to market to people for money, which, if it's your trauma, I feel like it should be okay for you to make money off your own trauma. It's different when someone else is trying to do that. But it's also sort of dark in that he has a whole back room of like stuff from the show, like it's a museum, which is fine in like the first part of that little back room that he shows people for however much money. But then when you get further back, you see like there's items that were there on the day that people were murdered, which is really scary and sinister and a little dark. And maybe he should maybe go to therapy for that, or maybe he has. But the idea of selling it for money seems insensitive, but I suppose you can judge him while still understanding where he's coming from and his sadness, and it's his trauma, and he should be able to say whatever he wants about his own trauma, right? I suppose. But also, if there's no demand for what he is selling, then maybe that's also part of the problem, the people willing to pay to go see that room. Like, there's so many levels of sort of fucked up in that, and I just think it's an interesting approach that Jordan had that in the film, the spectacle and how outlandish and dangerous and crazy it can get, and still people are like, that was so cool, right? It's just so freaking crazy. And so anyway, I think other ideas of spectacle in terms of this being, they're seeing it as an animal, right? So the way that OJ approaches fighting back or getting the shot and also surviving it is that he will treat it as an animal. Don't look it in the eye. It's going off of instinct. Don't test it. You know, this thing is a lot larger than us. In the film, it sort of looks like a cowboy hat. It has this wide gaping hole at the bottom of it, and then it's sort of like a beige color. But then if it decides to alter its form, it sort of looks like it's sprouting its wings, some version of a wing. You just really have to see it, so you should totally look up images from Nope, and you'll probably see it in there. Maybe I'll have it on the thumbnail. But I just think it's really interesting, the approach of the aesthetic and the visual of the being, and how dangerous it is. I mean, it's eating horses, basically anything that looks in its eye, which is that gaping hole, I suppose, is sort of where it can see you. It's so odd, but that's what's cool about it. It's mysterious, it's different, it's not what you would expect. And you don't really know what to expect. I mean, there's these horrifying shots of it going after OJ, and OJ being in the car and not looking it in the eye, and a scene with the Jupe when he's finally deciding to show an audience what he's been looking at for a while, and then the audience dies along with Jupe and his family, and they're sucked into it, and we see them being real human beings being in a giant esophagus, it looks like, and consumed as they're screaming, and we realize that a lot of the objects that are getting sort of fleshed out, like if he was urinating or going to the restroom or something, are items like metal, keys, just things that he's not digesting, and he's just spelling that all out into the world, which is probably why OJ's father died, because that coin that just came out of nowhere was released and killed him. So that's the connection to that. The being is most likely the thing that killed him, because it was spelling out items from someone that he killed or it killed. And that does beg the question, and I wasn't sure of this, if Jupe had other audiences and those people died and he just lived, or what happened. Is this the first time he had a big audience because he invited tons of people, even the neighbors next door? I don't know. It was just, I want to know the details of that, and I don't think that I grasped it. Or maybe it was more ambiguous than I can remember or recall. And so there's all that. And then we go into the whole M and Angel and this director that sort of helps them out after they talk him into it. People wanting to be a part of something when they realize it's serious. TMZ showing up and then not leaving after he's been warned that he could die. It's just crazy. And the being basically bleeding onto OJ and M's house, that really, really scary shot. And them being in the house, M and Angel at some point scared and can't go anywhere. A spectacle and so much to really delve into. But I think those shots, those breakdowns of the characters, the idea of doing anything, even risking your life for the betterment of your life, I suppose, for being different. And I do think, like I said before, there's something to be said about OJ and M trying to profit off of something that was on their land, that broke into their lives. It wasn't like they went out and were seeking it. And then Jupe sort of just being next door and being like, oh, that's kind of cool. I want to try to make money off of that. So it's crazy. And there are so many other levels to the film that I think a lot of people have decided to discuss besides spectacle. But I feel like spectacle was just everywhere. And I think that's the overall theme of the film. And different varying levels. So I just wanted to take a moment to do a commentary about it and talk about that. And ultimately, I really enjoyed Nope, even like 2 years later watching it. And I think that you will too. I feel like it was sort of a shout out to other films that Pill has probably seen. If you know, you know. And I just hope that you will take the time to go see the film and enjoy. So now I will go to my quote segment and then we'll be done for the day. Antlers. This dream you're chasing, where you end up at the top of the mountain, all eyes on you. It's a dream you never wake up from. OJ. Nope.